The original Ocean's 11 was a heist film that was directed by Louis Milestone. In 1960, the Rat Pack, including Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop, filmed this classic movie. It's completely loaded with stars, people like Angie Dickinson, Cesar Romero, Richard Conte, Henry Silva, and Norman Fell. Old Blue Eyes plays Danny Ocean, who's a playboy who rounds up his old army buddies for a military-style heist in Vegas. Their plan is to rip off 5 casinos on New Year's Day. The movie is terribly fun to watch. It's based on being a heist caper, but it really is just an excuse for a bunch of friends to get together and relive the past. They end up meeting in the decadence capital of the world, that being Las Vegas. This group had bonded as paratroopers in the Second World War, and then they come together again for another mission. Each one of them has a personal reason to pull the heist off. One wants to get his wife out of the stripping clubs, one is dying of cancer and needs to pay his kids' way through college. Another one really wants to play baseball, but is forced to drive a garbage truck instead. He wants to buy his way out of his life. This caper that they plan and execute is so low-tech, it's almost believable that they could really pull it off. The men will turn out the lights during a New Year's celebration, hit the casinos, and split with the cash in a garbage truck. This 1960 cast, led by Frank Sinatra, is so overloaded with talent, they in themselves are just compelling to watch, the script being set aside. Sinatra is kind of the top singer in the universe, and he had just won an Academy Award from the movie From Here to Eternity. He's probably one of the greatest lounge singers that there is, and he's definitely just a cultural icon. Dean Martin plays along with him, and these two just have a great chemistry together. Martin is truly one of the people that Sinatra actually idolized. Then you have Sammy Davis Jr., who'd been singing and dancing in vaudeville since he was born. A lot of people thought he was just a mascot for this group of white guys. But that's not so at all. Sinatra and he were very close. So much so that Sinatra told the casino and club owners across the country that if Sammy isn't allowed in the front door with us, then he'd walk out. Now, you currently have those three at the top of the list, but don't forget Shirley MacLaine, who makes a great non-billed appearance as a drunk gal who almost blows the entire heist as she staggers around. Then you've got Peter Lawford and Joey Bishop. Each one of these guys is a rare talent in itself. The film has an old school style and quality that is just something that can't be faked. Frank and Dean had a way of holding a highball glass and a cigarette that made you focus on them. They are constantly impeccably dressed that creates an attraction that draws you to them. In the scene where Danny, played by Frank Sinatra, and Adele, played by Patrice Wymore, Adele throws a candy dish at Danny. The throwing of this dish was ad-libbed, which accounts for the genuine look of surprise on Sinatra's face and the faces of his co-stars. She zings this thing at him. As a matter of fact, the conversations and interactions between the major characters a lot of times were ad-libbed. These actors had known each other so well for so long that it was really easy for them to improvise dialogue that was better than what was written in the script. Most of the filming was accomplished early in the morning, before sunrise, since most of these actors also had shows going on in Las Vegas, and they performed them nightly during the shooting. They would wake up in the afternoon, do 1 or 2 shows in the evening, and then go through makeup and arrive at the shooting locations for principal photography. Each location that they filmed at was fully set up in advance so that minimal time would be wasted once the actors arrived. This movie has tons of one-liners in it, and one of the primary people that's responsible for some of the classic dialogue in the film is Angie Dickinson. The first one that comes to mind for her character is when her and Danny get into the elevator and Danny pins her up against the back wall and says, "I've got great news for you." She responds by saying, "Auburn beat Alabama by 12 points? The movie is just laced with these witty dialogues that are in the script. During Dean Martin's scene with Shirley MacLaine, after she calls him Ricky Nelson, Dean replies to her, "I used to be Ricky Nelson, but now I'm Perry Como." In real life, early in his singing career, most critics used to refer to him as a knockoff of Perry Como. In addition to that, he had just done Rio Bravo that starred Ricky Nelson. The next time you watch the film, take a look at all the telephones in the hotel rooms and in general. None of them have dials on them, which means that all calls, room to room, local, or long distance, had to go through the hotel operator. This was really common in hotels until the late 1960s, when electronic telephone switching systems were installed. Initially, the ending of the film was completely different. Danny Ocean and his men make it out of Vegas with the money by getting away on a chartered plane. But then the entire gang is killed in a plane crash. No one on the cast actually liked this ending and felt that it was too much of a downer, so they rewrote it, and that being where the money gets burned up with Tony Bergdorf's body when he's cremated. This ended up popping into the director's head because he had just attended a cremation funeral for a friend, and he thought, what better way to have the money disappear? Angie Dickinson, in her role in this film, just stands out like no other. She's absolutely beautiful in her role as Beatrice. After her family moved to California, she found work as a secretary, and then she started competing in beauty pageants, which ended up leading to a spot on the Colgate Comedy Hour. This is where she got her first introduction to Frank Sinatra. In 1960, she ends up co-starring with the Rat Pack in this film. Then she goes on to start dating Frank. They got extremely close, and they started talking about marriage in 1964. But she just couldn't deal with his late-night lifestyle. It just wasn't for her. And the truth be known, Frank really didn't want to marry an actress. She was terribly scared that Frank was going to ask her to marry him. And she didn't want to do that because she just wasn't comfortable with his way of life. What complicated this even more is that she just didn't want to have to say no to Frank Sinatra. Who does that? Their chemistry was absolutely grand during this filming, and she's truly one of the highlights of the movie. In the final shot of the film, the 11 walk past the famous sign in front of the Sands Hotel. The 5 members of the Rat Pack, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford, are billed at the top of the sign. The original Ocean's 11 is a time capsule that shows us a group of people with huge personalities and extraordinary talent. The next time you watch this classic movie, think to yourself that Frank, Dean, and Sammy are probably watching from that big saloon in the sky. They're probably lighting another cigarette, making another drink, and saying to each other, "Ain't that a kick in the head?" Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.